Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shahriar Hussain from Batch 182. Today, we are here to be a part of our DAH alumni talk by one of our recent graduates, Radia Al Rashid, who will be talking about her undergrad thesis on aviation linguistics. First, I'm honored to welcome among us Air Vice Marshal Mahmoud Hussain, former High Commissioner to Brunei Darussalam, who has joined us to discuss the topic and share his experience from his time in the Bangladesh Air Force. He'll also shed light on career options for English graduates in his field of expertise. We have with us too the head of the Department of English and Humanities, Associate Professor Ms. Arifa Ghani Rahman. In addition, I welcome my faculty members as well as my fellow students for whom this session itself is an encouragement for the future scholars of DEH. We'll first listen to the speaker, Radia Al Rashid, and then move into the discussion. Please allow me to introduce today's speaker. Ms. Radia Al Rashid is a recent graduate of DEH. Her talk today, titled Language Beyond the Skyline, is based on her undergrad thesis on aviation linguistics, which she completed in spring 2021. Radia has an excellent academic record from her 4-year BA in English program and has plans to pursue from in-depth knowledge in the field of aviation linguistics in the coming future. Now, without further ado, I'd like to request our speaker, Ms. Radia Al Rashid, to enlighten us on her highly interesting undergrad thesis topic. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Shahriar, for a very vivid introduction. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. It means a lot, and I really want to convey my deepest gratitude to Arifa ma'am and the whole department for giving me this opportunity. And again, I'm saying it means a lot, really. And of course, I want to convey my heartiest gratitude to our special guest, His Excellency Air Vice Marshal Mahmoud Hussain, former High Commissioner to Brunei Darussalam, for joining this talk. And I couldn't possibly express how honored I am for your presence today. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. It means a lot. Okay, so this is Radia Al Rashid, and Shahriar already given a little introduction about myself, so I'm not going there anymore. So I have chosen this aviation linguistics and ATC communication because, well, as a person, I'm very interested in aviation, and I'm really, like one of those aviation crazes who are really crazy about flying and everything related to it. But when first I started to show my interest in this topic, Mahmoud sir was there, my supervisor. I'm really thankful to sir as well for guiding me through the whole dissertation. He was there to just, cheer me up and encourage me to go ahead and do the research. And some of my friends and also the fellow junior students showed their interest in this particular topic. So I'm wishing today's talk will be a little bit of heads up for them, and they can know a little more about this topic. So again, another disclaimer, I am no expert in this field. So I just had to learn and study considerably for my thesis, and basing on that knowledge and understanding, I'm going to give this talk today. All right, so let's get going. I guess I will have to first share my screen. All right, okay, so let's get started. So aviation linguistics and ATC communication. So first, I will want to give a general idea about what it is and how does that work, and how does language work, and how, rules and regulations about this specific field is applied for this, industry. And sometimes we really think that the pilot's competency and engine and other equipments are very much important for keeping a plane floating up in the air. But this is not absolutely true, because language plays a very vital role in this industry. When I came to know about it, it was fascinating and so interesting that I couldn't just, keep myself away from it. So I just dug deeper and knew more and more about it. So first of all, for aviation linguistics, which is the language used in aviation. In 1951, International Civil Aviation Organization, which is known as ICAO, has established English as the lingua franca for the international context. So English and a semi-artificial sublanguage based on English played a dominant role as the means of communication in aviation, especially in the communication between pilots and air traffic controllers and in international context. So international context should be mentioned here in particular because sometimes in local context, not all the rules and regulations are strictly followed, but when it's come to international context, just like my topic that was there for my thesis, US Magna Flight 211, that was about an international context because it was between Nepal and Bangladesh. So it was very much, very much important in that case to follow the rules and regulations strictly. All right, so aviation English is characterized by the following main features. So these are main features. There are other sub-features and there are needed other explanations as well. But the main features, the first one being rules about the order of priority between different types of messages. So here we need to understand one thing, that air traffic controllers, which is the ATC, they are not actually there to deal with one aircraft at a time. Sometimes the airport becomes really busy and occupied, so they have to deal with several aircrafts, more than one aircraft at a time. So at that point, what they have to do is they have to prioritize the emergency messages first, or the more important messages first. For the in the similar way, for the pilots or the air crews, the messages that has to be dealt with immediately or instantly, that should be conveyed to the ATC first, and then follow the order accordingly. And number two is a spelling code for letters and numbers. We will talk about it a little later. And number three is rules for the expressions of call signs. So what are the call signs? The call signs are really very much very much certain and very much unique sort of identifiers for the aircrafts themselves. So the aircrafts have to give their call signs using the phonetic alphabet, devised by aviation personnel, like devised by mainly ICAO, which is known as phonetic alphabets of aviation. Again, we will look at it in the spelling code for letters and numbers section. And rules about the message structure. This is another important factor, as in it's a certain message structure. First, there will be a question or query, then there will be the answer or instruction, then there will be a readback, or this clarification that, okay, I got your message, I got your information, so that's it then. Because when we are talking face to face, it's very easy for us to understand what the other person is saying, because we are looking at the body language, we are looking at the gestures, we are looking at everything, right? And also we can hear his or her voice pretty clear. But when it comes to radio medium, it is pretty tricky and pretty confusing to know everything or to understand everything, right? And that's why the readback comes in. And rules about which messages to send in cases of emergency. So in general aviation, generalized form, there are two signals. One is Mayday and another is Pan-Pan. So there are different type of situations basing on how life-threatening that might be. These two different call signs can be used to convey the message. A list of conventional expressions and their meanings, again, they are about jargons, and also some phraseologies are used particularly in aviation linguistics. So this is what I was talking about. So the numbers, if we look at the numbers, 0 to 2 are almost similar. The pronunciation is similar, but when it comes to 3, it's 3. 4 is a little bit more stressed, like 4. Then 5 is 5. 6, 7, 8 is just all the same, but 9 is niner. 100 and again 1000 is 1000. And here one is missing, which is 10. It's actually called decimal. At many cases, 10 is called decimal in order to avoid any sort of confusion with another numbers, So why is that? Why is 3 and 5 and niner? Why is that? So it's about the phonetic problem, to avoid the phonetic problem. So what happens is that sometimes for non-native speakers, the dental fricatives, just like the or the, are pretty difficult, or sometimes it's pretty muddled to pronounce clearly. We tend to say thank you instead of thank you, right? Sometimes in our accent, and it's not incorrect, but it can be confusing when it comes to aviation linguistics. And sometimes for this, like the or like the, we say like the. So these all things, to avoid all of these confusions, they are, they have devised this to 5 and 3 and 1,000. And what about niner? Niner is also, 9 can also be confused with 5, like 5, 9. So it can also be confused in the radio medium, right? So that's why it's niner to just set it apart from 5. And for the phonetic alphabet, here's a very, very interesting story behind it. So it was about an Australian aircraft, I guess it was about an Australian Airlines as well. Yeah, so the pilot was Australian, and as an Australian, he had a very strong, thick Australian accent. So we know that Australian accent is a little, I'm not going to say weird because that would be really racist. I'm not going to say that, but it's a different, it's different from the American accent we are used to listening to. So the air traffic controller was American and the pilot was Australian. So the pilot was talking about mode A. So what is mode? Mode is one, like transponder. There is something called transponder, which is something that receives the radio signals, right? So that's called mode. That's called transponder. But civil aircrafts may be equipped with transponders capable of operating in different modes. So there are different modes in terms of alphabets, like mode A, mode B, mode C, something like that. So he was talking about mode A, but the air traffic controller thought he was talking about Mayday, which is an emergency situation. So he was like freaking out and all, but the pilot was really calm and quiet. So he asked, okay, what is that happening? Why are you so calm or something? Then he said, okay, I'm talking about mode A here. Then from that situation, the ICAO decided to, do something about it so that no accent problem can occur. So now that we can say mode alpha or mode foxtrot, like mode Sierra, mode Yankee, we don't have to consider the accent problem in here, right? Any accent can sound like the same for these particular words. So not only for modes, but also for another sort of phonetic, another sort of alphabets, just like the call signs I've mentioned before, these phonetic alphabets are used. Okay, so I have already talked about phonology and then about lexis. So these expressions are used, are scripted to use in and outside of the cockpit, between the ATC and pilots. Why? Because when we are affirming with someone like, yes, of course, no sweat, no worries, I'll do that. There can be a lot of different expressions be used when we are conversing in our real life situations. But when it comes to aviation English, it has to be very precise and very, like scripted and very controlled. So they say affirm, and for no, they say negative. For like, I'd like to, or could I, some sort of request, they just say request, nothing else. And again, for repeat, sorry, or what, or excuse me, they just say again. So these all are actually some sort of terminologies or phraseologies that are used in the lexical level. And in syntax also, there are rules and regulations. The first one being the deletion of determiners. Like instead of resume your own navigation, they say resume own navigation. And they tend to delete the determiners in order to just, like make it simplistic and not very much jumbled up with words that are not really necessary. And for the deletion of preposition, it's really important because it has caused a lot of incidents in the aviation history. We will look at one later, but it's about that when we are not giving the prepositions in there, so there will not be any confusion between the homophones, such as number 2 and preposition to, right? So it's like instead of saying climb to 150, they say climb 150. All right, then pronoun deletion is also there, again, for the sake of making it simplistic, and also from my own understanding and knowledge, I can assume that it can be for the sake of party line communication. So here's one thing about party line communication, that under one radio frequency, there can be several aircrafts. And when one aircraft is communicating with the ATC, or the ATC is communicating with any aircraft, the other aircraft can also listen to it. So what happens is that when they are using the pronouns, the personal pronouns, that can be really misleading, sometimes really like misunderstanding, right? So one can just say the flight number, for example, BS211, will shortly lose rudder contact. It will be much easier for all of the aircraft to understand which aircraft is being addressed, rather than if they said BS211, you will shortly lose rudder contact. Okay, so as I said before, there are a lot of communications going on inside the aviation industry. There is no one or two, because if we consider the insider cockpit communication, we can say there is communication between two pilots, if there are two. Sometimes there are three. For the jumbo aircrafts, there can be a second officer as well. So there are communications between these three pilots, or there are communications between pilots and air crews, air marshal and air crews and pilots, then pilots and passengers, right? Then ATC and ATC. But now this one, which is air traffic controller and pilots, this conversation is regarded as more important because it is mostly done via radio medium. As I mentioned for some times, but this is very important to understand that this is, most of it actually done via radio medium, and which makes it really sensitive and vulnerable to potential slip-ups. And the potential slip-ups sometimes can be very mild and sometimes can result in disasters, like real disasters. You will be like blown away when you will know about them. And that's why to eliminate, I'm not going to say eliminate, to minimize that sort of problem, that sort of slip-ups, readback is very important. So readback is an information confirmation procedure where the receiver must repeat the instructions or information on the syntactic level, which means word by word, given by the speaker to make sure the comprehension is correct. So here, I really want to show you one example from my own thesis that was very important for this particular aircraft. So what happened in there is, if we can look at it, KTM tower, which means the Kathmandu tower, is saying that BS211 tower, you were given landing clearance to runway 02. And the pilot in command is saying, affirmative, ma'am. Then Kathmandu tower, you are going towards runway 20. And this is very natural that there is a very problematic catch in between the number 20 and 02, but the problem actually exacerbated when he did not give this readback correctly and completely. See what happened. I think we are going to runway 02. Then the ATC is saying BS211 runway 20 clear to land, and the pilot in command is saying clear to land, and he didn't even mention the number of runway in there, right? It is just one instance in that particular flight. It happened over 4 to 5 times that they did not complete the readback. For which reason? It was the situation was exacerbated, of course, and it led to the ultimate crash. And it was really sad and unfortunate. All right, for the structure, I just said it's more like a loop. First, the ATC clearance or the ATC instruction is there. Then the pilot is hearing or listening to that instruction, and he is giving that readback, and it's complete readback. I'm again saying complete readback. It's very important. And when he's giving the readback, the controller's duty is to hear the readback carefully in order to see that if it's correct or not. If it's not correct, he will correct it any further, or if it's correct, then he will just say, okay, proceed or go ahead or something. Right, so these are some of the codes or jargons or sometimes phraseologies that are commonly used in almost all the almost all the airlines communications. So first one is affirm. We talked about it before, negative, affirmative, affirm, this one. And then approach. heading toward land. When someone from the airline or aviation personnel is saying approach, it's not like approaching to someone, it's like heading toward the land. And deadhead is known as a crew member who is traveling in a passenger seat. So like from now on, when you will hear someone talking about a deadhead, no worries, it's no coffin or dead body. It's just a crew member that is traveling in a passenger seat. And squawk, to set a transponder, I've talked about transponder before, so it's a device that receives radio signals so that a radar on the ground can identify the precise location of the aircraft. So pilots are often asked to squawk ident. It's one type of identity, right? Or squawk mode Charlie. Again, that mode Charlie means mode C. So it is more like to make sure that you are activated in mode C. So that's more like the squawk mode Charlie. So all of these are actually happened to ensure that the air traffic controllers can find the aircrafts. Then standby means exactly what you think. Please wait. And will co means it's an abbreviation mostly of the words will comply. And will comply means, like I will do that. So will co means that the pilot has heard the message and plans to comply, or sometimes the ATC can say will co, that he had heard the message right and will comply accordingly. Right, so now about the emergency call. So I've talked about it a little, like Mayday and Pan. So Mayday radio call is actually reserved for the life-threatening situations. There can be very dangerous and very bleak kind of situations arise when like you have to just you have to call for immediate help. Maybe the lives of your passengers are at stake, and maybe your life is at risk, right? At that's kind of situations, more like aircraft upset by turbulences, the weather, or the pilot incapacitation. It can be happened. Maybe he just fell sick. Maybe he was attacked. Spatial disorientation, control surface or structural failure, or engine failure that will lead to forced landing, ditching, ejection, bailout, or an onboard fire. So all of these can be addressed by Mayday. But Mayday call sign is not just limited to just these 5 kind of situations, right? There can be a lot of other life-threatening situations as well. For example, there can be snakes on the plane, just like the movie. Of course, it haven't happened yet, but who knows? Maybe it will happen, right? So yeah, that's about Mayday. And Pan. It's about the ones which is not immediately life-threatening, but can be turned out into one, right? Something like becoming lost. Maybe the aircraft just became lost and it needs the assistant to just come out of it. And then a serious aircraft system failure, maybe a transponder failure, or maybe some other really important equipment failure that requires an immediate route or altitude change. Other emergencies that require immediate attention and assistance from the ground. So all of these are under the call sign of Pan. All right, so we have just talked about a lot of this and that, the ins and outs of aviation linguistics and ATC communication and how important they are and how they work and how they, go with each other, how they're associated with the safety of the airline, of the safety of the aviation industry. So now it's time to look at the deadliest air disasters that actually were happened only because of miscommunication. And that's really sad that it was not the engine failure, it was not the pilot's incompetency, it was only the miscommunication that worked as the source, or that worked as the root cause of all of these disasters. So first is Avianca Flight 52, Air Florida Flight 90, Singapore Airlines Linate Airport disaster, Dan Air Flight, PSA Flight, American Airlines Flight Garuda Indonesia, Charkhi Dadri mid-air collision. It was really sad. It was mid-air collision. The others were actually like maybe before landing or before approach, but it was mid-air. I mean, 2 planes collided mid-air. It was really sad. And the last one, which is Tenerife Airport disaster, the deadliest and worst disaster in the history of aviation. It happened on the runway, like face-to-face. The 2 jumbo planes just crashed face-to-face only because of the miscommunication. That's really unfortunate. But what I worked with was US Mangla Flight 211 2018. That happened back in 2018. It's not one of the deadliest internationally, but it was one of the deadliest in the Bangladesh history. And it was really, again, it was really, really heart-wrenching because Of course, the pilot was in a very gloomy mood that day for some reason, for his resignation and all. But the problem actually arises when the pilot and the first officer started to muddle up the instruction for landing on the runways. So the runway number was the problem, was the main problem, I would say, 20 and 02. It was really problematic, and the communicative gaps, the communication, the misinterpretation, everything just brewing up led to the crash. So there are two different examples from two different situations that how aviation linguistics can actually work as miracle. So the following problem, which involves homophony, I've talked about it, led to the crash of an aircraft on its approach to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in 1989. So the controller clears the aircraft to descent 2400. So what's happening here? The controller knows that you need to omit or delete the preposition in order to omit any confusion, right? But the pilot reads the clearance back as, okay, 400. So he confused these two with that two. He thought he's talking about the preposition to, but he was talking about the number two, right? And then the controller did not catch the readback error. So there were three problems at a row. The first one being the controller was aware of the rule that the prepositions should be deleted, but the pilot was not aware of the rule, so he read it back very, incorrectly. And then the controller did not catch the incorrect readback. What happened then was perhaps because he was not a native speaker, or maybe perhaps because he was busy with another aircraft, so he didn't really care much about that. Then the aircraft descends to 400 feet rather than the appropriate altitude of 2,400 feet and crashes into a mountain peak at 481 feet. This is insane because only a two made such a big difference, and two made such a big disaster, right? Just two, because he thought it was preposition, but it was a number. So again, homophones. So that was really unfortunate kind of event, but the second one, thankfully, didn't end up in an accident, but it was just about to. So what happened in there was the pilot cruising at flight level 230 requests permission to ascend to flight level 310. But the controller saying 310 is the wrong altitude for your direction of flight. I can give you 290, but you will have to negotiate for higher. So the controller must be the native speaker here, and the pilot was maybe non-native. So what happened in here is the controller is talking in a very conversational tone, and he kind of like forgot about the ATC or the aviation linguistic rules to follow, right? So in a very conversational tone, he said, I can give you that, but you'll need to negotiate for higher. But the pilot thought, okay, he just cleared me to land rise to 290, so I'm leaving 230. But this erroneous feedback readback was not again corrected, just like the first instance. But thankfully, in one point later, the controller noticed the aircraft is at a wrong altitude, and he states, I did not clear you to climb, descend immediately to FL 230. So it was very, very narrow escape, and they could save the plane. But just think about it, how badly it might have just, ended in a very big disaster if the controller did not notice it at the right time. Okay, so now we have really discussed a lot, not a lot, discussed the general informations of it. So what I want to say that this is a huge field of study, because what I did for my thesis was I chose conversation analysis, not the total one, I chose sequence organization and topic construction from conversation analysis, and also the aviation linguistics domains such as readback error, cockpit insider coordination, and phraseologies for my own thesis, right? So I worked with this, and I just looked at the sequence organizational errors. I looked at the adjacency pairs, how base sequences were not finished, how after a first pair part there was no second pair part, then how the topic construction were really, really muddled because the pilot in command was actually talking about some other topics and the first officer was dying to start another topic, but that was not, there was no coordination between the two. And then again, the aviation linguistics domains were also looked at, and I obviously I checked if the linguistic factors were responsible for the crash in any way, right? But you guys can do, what you guys, by you guys, I mean whoever wants to do a research on it, or maybe whoever wants to just study it for the sake of it, or for knowing a little more in depth, maybe. So what you can do is you can just look at the CVR transcripts, the communication of regular flight, not necessarily it has to be accident or, any kind of incident. You can just look at a regular flight. You can look at how phonetically aviation linguistics is different from the language we are using on everyday basis, right? You can look at the syntactic level of it. You can look at the lexical level of it. And also you can look at the implications and speech act theories used inside of this kind of communications, right? And it's very important and interesting that I really didn't think about it before when I was doing my research. Sorry for that, okay? Doing my research, then when I was preparing for this talk, I thought about this cultural difference and social linguistic aspect and approach of it. And it was really fascinating that there is very much, it's very much present about the high context and low context cultures and power hierarchy of language use. When you think about this accident, Avianca Flight 52, it actually happened partly because the air crews were not able to word their concern in, in the scripted language, and partly because they were very much mild. They were both of them were from Colombia, and they were talking about their fuel because they were running out of it. They were running out of fuel. The situation was really problematic. So they were really, tensed and all, but they couldn't bring themselves to be a little blatant. And they were talking with the ATCs of JF Kennedy Airport. And JF Kennedy Airport air traffic controllers are really infamous for being really blatant and sometimes a little rude, because the airport is always busy and packed, so they have to deal with a lot of aircrafts at once. So if you can't be a little blatant and rude with them, there's no chance you can be heard by them, right? So the two of them were just, constantly saying that, we really, really need to land because our fuel is, we are out of fuel. So the two problems were there. The first one was the power hierarchy. They couldn't bring themselves up because in Colombia, the power hierarchy is a lot more. It's a high context culture than America. It's very low context, right? And it was really problematic for them to just talk in a very blatant and rude voice with the air traffic controller. And also they failed to use the appropriate phraseology like Mayday, right? But it was there, and it is there always. And it can be a really good opportunity for you guys to look at that, like how sociolinguistically it is different, like cultural difference, how cultural difference makes it impossible to, sustain a friendly environment inside the cockpit. And no offense to anyone, but when I was thinking about it, and I also found, and I also realized that the thesis topic of mine, which was US Bangla Flight 211, there was also that sort of power hierarchy in language use inside the cockpit. But when the captain Abid, the pilot in command, was talking about his resignation, and he was very upset, and he was really, crying and all. But then Prithula, who was the first officer, she couldn't bring herself up to just, just blatantly say, okay, sir, it's enough. We need to focus on other things at hand now. But she couldn't say it because of that power hierarchy, right? Maybe the result would be different. Maybe it wouldn't. We don't know yet, but it is a very, very interesting and very informative field to study. And last but not least, LSP or ESP, which is the language for a specific purpose or English for a specific purpose. As I mentioned before, that aviation English is a very, very specialized version of English, which is particularly used inside the aviation industry. So it is obviously a part of English for specific purposes. And if you want to study, you can study that as well. Okay. So these are the two websites I thought should mention, because I collected my own research data set, which was the severe transcript of US Bangla Flight 211 from the first one, which is the tailstrike.com. There you can find a lot of severe transcripts, but no tape recorded version. But in the next one, which is aviationexplorer.com, there you can find not all, but some of the severe transcripts, tape recorded versions. So you can just, like explore, know about it a lot more. And maybe it's not about the, just study and all sort of that heavyweight talks, like research or dissertation. Maybe you don't want to do about it, but if you want, you can actually, because it's unfortunate that in Bangladesh, I didn't find much information on this particular field, to be honest, but it was a little hurdle for me, because I also mentioned in the limitations of my study that this was a hurdle because I couldn't understand any contextual opinion on the linguistic use, and also I couldn't find any locally sourced information on that. So I had to rely a lot on the international context, right? So I guess this is a very good opportunity to just start researching on this topic and just expand the literature body of this topic for our country. Okay, and also one thing is really important, I guess, for our entertainment, the memes are important, right? So if you know a lot more about this topic, you can understand memes like this one, and memes are always fun, trust me. All right, so I guess that's it from me today, and thank you very much everyone for listening to the entire talk very patiently, and thank you again for coming here and joining to cheer for me. Thank you. All right, ma'am, I guess.
So thank you so much, Ms. Radia Al Rashid, for such an engaging and interesting talk. It was amazing and fascinating as always. Just a moment ago, we had our acting vice chancellor and professor. Yeah, just a moment.
Sir had to go.
Sir had to leave, right? Okay.
Yes.
So, okay then. So now I'd like to invite our head and associate professor of Department of English and Humanities, DEH, Ms. Arifa Ghani Rahman, to introduce today's special guest and discussant, Air Vice Marshal Mahmood Hussain. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Shahriar. And Radia, I am amazed. I am completely, blown away by your presentation. I did not imagine that you had so much detail and so much information over there. So thank you so much for a brilliant presentation and wonderful, information. So thank you very much for that. And now I would like to take the opportunity. It's my privilege and honor. And I'm grateful to Air Vice Marshal Mahmood Hussain for joining us today, for gracing the occasion today, and agreeing to be a discussant of your talk. And I'll just give a brief bio of Sir so that you can get a sense of his background and how he's involved in this profession for so many years. So I have his bio in front of me. I'm just going to read that. Air Vice Marshal, he's retired. Mahmood Hussain joined the Bangladesh Air Force in 1979 and retired with distinction after 36 years of military career. He was an operational helicopter pilot and logged a total of 3,500 hours, both on fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters. He served as an instructor at the Bangladesh Air Force Academy, as well as Deputy Director of Training, Deputy Air Secretary, and Director Recruitment. He commanded 2 flying squadrons at Dhaka and Chittagong, and was the base commander of the BAF base Bashar from 2008 to 2009. He also served in 2 UN missions. In 1993 to 1994, Air Vice Marshal Hussein worked as the military observer in UN Pro-4 in former Republic of Yugoslavia. He was the first contingent commander of the Bangladesh Air Force in 2003 to 4 in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He served as the chairman of Bangladesh Civil Aviation Authority from May 2010 to October 2014, and was elected chairman in 2011 to 2013 of the steering committee of COSCAP South Asia, which is the regional forum of the Directors General of SAARC Civil Aviation Authorities. He was also the chairman of D8 DGCA Forum in 2013 to 2014. Sir is the former High Commissioner Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to Brunei Darussalam, where he served from 2016 to 2020. Air Vice Marshal Mahmoud Hussein is currently employed as a faculty member at the Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Aviation and Aerospace University. Welcome to our program, sir, and thank you so much for agreeing to be discussant. May I hand over the stage to you?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Arifur Rahman, in fact, for hosting this session, this wonderful session. I would like to also thank Acting Vice Chancellor for making it easier for me to listen to somebody who has done a lot of research. In fact, I must congratulate Radia Al Rashid. After so many years, I left flying almost about 10 years back, and she has reminded me all those things we it is indeed a great pleasure to relearn all those things which I have forgotten. So I will not be able to critique on whatever you have done. You have virtually covered. Dr. Mahmoud Hassan, probably, sir, without your efforts, you would not have been able to go so much in depth of the analysis with regard to the linguistic problem in aviation. Now, she has virtually covered everything you have. I must say that your paper is extremely technical. So with regard to technicalities, I might be knowing much lesser than you at present. Like you have said that in the air, we don't say 9, we say the 9. But probably if I go into the cockpit by mistake, I will just pronounce 9 because I have not been practicing flying for the last 10 or 11 years. And then you have talked about transponder, which is in fact a technical equipment, and how does transponder send signals for the radio stations to find out the location of the aircraft. And SCOP mode A, SCOP mode B, SCOP mode C. In fact, I also do not remember what exactly they do mean now. I mean, unless and otherwise I reintroduce myself into the aviation sector as a pilot once again. And Mayday call, you have mastered it very well. I think that if you are put on an aircraft, and if there is a situation, you and what is a Panday call, right? And with regard to introduction of theories, I'm extremely impressed that you have brought about the context of relevance theory, in which pragmatic interference is one of the most important things to make something very effective and useful. Then speech act theory, and behavioral science theory, power hierarchy, and somewhat it gives me a feeling that the what you call it approach to the theories has made this research a completely holistic interpretation of what a language is and how this language functions in the sky. Clear? Now, that's why what I will do, I'll just share some of my thoughts languidly with regard to whatever I remember about English and why is it so important in aviation sector. Now, you know that the ICAO convention was introduced in the year 1944, probably. It was in 1948 that they decided that English will be made a lingua franca of aviation for communication. And when we talk about lingua franca, that means all the 7 continents, all the pilots, air traffic controllers, and other, in fact, professionals will speak in English. English will be the language in which they will communicate. Now, integrating this vast human population to the platform of one single language was a very difficult task. So aviation language became extremely specialized, and as it became extremely specialized, it also reminds me that it took the structure of mathematics. Like in mathematics, what happens? We have an equation, there are symbols and there are operators, and the symbols, in fact, will at the end give you the language in which the numbers are communicating. If you have studied set theory in your intermediate class, you'll see that the entire, in fact, a scenario or an event could be expressed with the help of set language. And this language was developed by, that Burton Russell and Zermelo, and George Cantor, and then Frege. So that is how language plays the extraordinary role in bringing people together. And language of aviation is obviously, I say, that is different from the language that we speak normally, or we come across in literature. I suppose that you are a student of literature. If you're a student of literature, then you'll find that which writer, in fact, comes close to this very specialized, in fact, diction or style of aviation language. I think it is Ernest Hemingway, who comes very close to, Hemingway comes very close to the kind of language that we use, specialized. It was monotonous, it was thirds, very precise. At the same time, it is very precise and useful. Aviation language is also very monotonous. In fact, you are speaking the same kind of words every day, almost you are memorizing it. And then it is thirds also, but it has to be very precise in order that people who are communicating between themselves, the communication can be between the air traffic controllers and the pilots, communication can be between the air traffic controllers and the ground controllers, whom we often mention. The communication can be between the pilots and the co-pilot, and the communication can be between the pilot and the instructor also. So the language itself has become some sort of a culture between the aviation professionals. When I was instructor, Radia, I tell you, my student used to be like you, might be that much younger than you also, because many of them came just after crossing their 12th grade. And when it was one-to-one contact, in fact, instructor is instructing the students in a language which is English. Now, that kind of language in which I'm talking to the student, it's a plain English language. It could take the form of conversation, but again, when I'm communicating to the air traffic controller, that was distinct, quite different. When I'm saying that look right, what do you see to the right? I always say that look 1 o'clock, not say that to right. Look 1 o'clock, he understands that he's looking at 1 o'clock to the right. Then when I say that look 3 o'clock, it means that he's looking at 90 degrees. I think you have gone through this. So this one is a little different from the one that we practice with the controllers, air traffic controllers, and we often, in fact, ignore the radar controllers also. Like in the Air Force, in fact, radar controllers operate through the medium of language, which is inscribed by your radar platform. Clear? So that is why I say that a language, when it takes a very spatial form, it also becomes a part of the theory of what you call it, hermeneutics. You must have heard the name of Jürgen Habermas. Okay, and Jürgen Habermas, in fact, he is one of the founding fathers of theory of communicating actions. Now, what he says, hermeneutics is the theory and methodology of interpretation, spatially the interpretation of biblical text, wisdom literature, and philosophical text. So whenever we replace this by the text of aviation, we can say that hermeneutics is also a spatial kind of treatment being given by. It is more than your interpretive principles or methods used when immediate comprehension fails, and includes the art of understanding and communication. Now, Habermas gives an example. Say, for example, as a soldier, I'm in a trench. All of a sudden, I hear the word attack. Clear? On hearing the word attack, then I may counterattack. I may feel that the enemy is coming. So I must, in fact, attack him. Or I might even run away from that place thinking that the enemy is coming. Okay. Or I may take a defensive position. So one single word in fact, means so much according to the context, according to the perspective the recipient takes on. Clear? So it is exactly the same thing that you have spoken here. So this theory can also a part of speech for your part, a very good source for investigation. How can you relate the linguistic diction with that of, say, diction used by what you call it, Ernest Hemingway? I mean, you can, the what you call it, content of James Joyce, or you can say that Thomas Hardy, you will find that they do not in fact corroborate with the kind of in fact specialized diction used by the aviators and air traffic controllers in their specialized language. So how does language modify? As a student of literature, in fact, that becomes a part of research for you. I'd always say, why do you think that English was chosen as a language of the aviation? I think you know that, but let me elaborate this a little bit. The birth of ICAO, in fact, it was the International Civil Aviation Organization who introduced, in fact, who set that the rules for communicative language or action for aviation would be English. It was done by International Civil Aviation Organization, which is also a supranational body or authority under the United Nations. And if you see the period between 44 and 48 was the period of a bipolar world. And who was in fact dominating that bipolar world? It is the United States of America and its allies. I mean, England, right, UK. So they decided if anybody has to speak in a language which will communicate him from one continent to the other through the means of the aeroplane in the medium of the air, that has to be English, which also speaks that English became an imperialistic source of inspiration for aviation all over the world. So from international point of view, it was a realist perspective that probably the founding fathers of ICAO decided that English would be the medium of language in aviation. But ultimately, you see how the realist perspective was used for the liberal utility or need. Clear? So this is how you can connect the two theories together. So it also says how important a language is determined by the political power that language in fact entails. And that political power comes from the political power of a particular state or a group of states. But English automatically became a lingua franca. And you must have heard the name of that is International Society of English Language of Aviation. I mean, this was established in France in 1990 because they also wanted that their pilots should also be, or their aviation professionals should also be, in order to face the challenges of the next generation of aviation responsibilities. Because if you're weak in communication, if your language is weak, no matter you're French, you're Chinese, you end up in having big disasters. You have cited so many examples. In fact, you have done so many case studies in which we have shown that because of the lack of competency in language, people have ended up in serious kind of disasters. Okay. And the other thing is that when it comes to English, I've seen that as chairman Civil Aviation Authority, in the international forum, all the nations are in fact interested in taking English on board as their language for communication because it makes their life easier. English, you have seen that as an aviation language is very simple, very facile. In fact, it is what is called as erasure. Like instead of giving big sentences, you cut the verb, pronounce in between, and you just say that what is some of the words like affirmative. Instead of saying affirmative, we say that affirm because it is just bigger. So the air traffic controller, in fact, he knows that it is yes, and somebody might be saying yeah, and the air traffic controller might be making a mistake because it has happened before. So they have chosen this word affirm. Okay. Now squawk is a squawk, little longer. So S has to come, in fact, sharply for a modulation of the three letters after quack. So this is what is called the modulation of the language for the benefit of the communicators. Now, why is it so? One of the most important things is that there are 5 strategic objectives of IQ. The first objective, language becomes a strong part of the aviation safety component. Okay, and for this language, there are tests. The pilots, air traffic controllers, the others, they have to go through tests every year, and they have to qualify at a certain level. Now, you have read that there are in fact 6 levels at which the tests are carried out. The tests are carried out both at the national level and the IQ level. There are auditors. The first level of efficiency skill, we say that it is just what you call it, pre-level. Then you have the level 2 and the level 3. Level 2 is what you call as intermediate level. Level 3 is pre-operational. Level 4, in fact, which is at which when somebody qualifies, he can take up your international flights. And if you have a skill up to level 4 as a pilot and air traffic controllers, you can handle the international flights. Otherwise you cannot handle international flights. And level 5 is a little higher, and level 6, the level at which probably you will be working for to become an expert in training lessons in aviation language to the pilots and the what you call it, aviators, the pilots and the other aviators, by say cabin crew and rest of the people. It is not merely that it is to avoid the accident, it is also to globally harmonize the many standards in which the language becomes the epitome for understanding both the operational, administrative, and logistic necessities of a particular function. Clear? Am I making myself clear to you? So I can always say that the way you have covered your presentation, you'll reach that stage very quickly, level 6, and you'll be able to offer your contribution to the nation. Remember one thing, when IQ does check on your English language test, they send their auditors, and they are very strict, no matter you may be even a native English speaker. The pilot in UK, the pilot in Bangladesh, or pilot in Africa, or the air traffic controllers in all these 3 countries have to pass through the same kind of rigorous testing. And sometimes it has happened. The Bangladeshi pilot has been qualified in his testing skill up to the level of 5, where somebody, native speaker, has not qualified, because it is not merely that you should be able to speak the language, talked about, which you should be able to possess. First one is pronunciation. If you fail in pronunciation, like say Australians might often fail in pronunciation because they have a peculiar dialectic sort of way of pronouncing words. Okay, so they might eat up some word and they might introduce a kind of accent which the other controllers will not understand. The same problem we might face some of the controllers or some of the pilots using in our country or in India also. In India, also South Indian accent. So the accent, in fact, is also very important. And I've seen that these days Chinese pilots and air traffic controllers, they speak very well because the way they pick up the accent. In other words, you can say that somebody who has learned the language through the proper pronunciation, through proper structuring and vocabulary, fluency, then comprehension, and finally interactions, because these are the skills required, categorical skills. These are categorical imperatives, we say. Then he might face very little problem in future in demonstrating his ability to communicate in the sky very effectively. Now, I have one more thing to tell you, which is that the language itself is very plain, isn't it? The language is not very tough. So but it is the technicality in which, the way in which you will use the words, that is in fact what you call it, requires a tremendous amount of training. And this is also in Bangladesh. The proper authority is the Civil Aviation Authority of Bangladesh for testing the pilots, their skills. And it is their responsibility, anybody who has acquired the level 4 level of competency, then he should be in fact renewed his his certification after 3 years. Somebody who has acquired up to the level of category 5, then his in fact testing will be done after every 5 years. And the annex which deals with this, the proper annex, I will tell you, you'll find this. You'll also see in that annex 1 of IQ document. We call them SRP, Standard Recommended Practices. These are all recommended practices. There are about 19 or 20 documents. The strange thing is that these are not mandatory on states, but states, if they deviate from that, they have to inform IQ. But with regard to English language, there is no, it is not considered to be a recommendation. There are strict strictures about this. So you can always say that to know English and to know fairly well with regard to aviation language is almost compulsory or mandatory. The other thing is that I will just give you the reference of document, what you call it. There is another document, which if you go through, we'll see that it talks in details about what all is there, document 9835. So this is a manual on the implementation of IQ language proficiency requirements. 9835. If you have not gone through it, if you go through this document, it will be very useful for you that how the particular language is transformed into speech act, and later on, how does it effectively serves its purpose through a process of utilitarianism amongst the group of aviators. By aviators, I mean, in fact, air traffic controllers and others also, ground handlers and others. The other important thing is that why English is so important for now. Now, we live in a globalized world, and the globalized world also has got a language. I personally feel that if you're good in English, then you'll be able to provide a kind of leadership to the world in aviation sector that will be a tremendous contribution to the national aviation development. Now, remember, a requirement of almost about 1 million aviation professionals in terms of pilots, in terms of engineers, close to about, say, 400,000. Okay, and the number of aircraft there will be, in fact, registered and new in the skies will be close to about 20,000. If that is the number, we have got a huge human resource potential, isn't it, in our country? And then many people can be, what you call it, inspired like you to join aviation, either as pilots, either as controllers, either in engineers, and all of them will require English. Now, you have seen that an aviation professional, he has to know English, but he has to know English fairly well. The skill test for level 5 or level 6 is quite, in fact, tough. I would say that it is almost like people sitting for higher, in fact, postgraduate entry examination for qualifying in their IELTS and others. So that is so. And the third thing is that our IQ, in fact, says that global civil aviation constitutes close to about 3.5% of global GDP. I mean, barring the period through which we are going in COVID-19. It also suggests that in future, if you want the economic development to grow in the aviation sector, and if you want to attract more number of people, we must be good in English. So English has a tremendous amount of importance in the context of aviation, and it cannot be understated also. And being students of English literature, I should say that you're especially privileged and very fortunate. And the others, all who have attended this session, 32 of them I see, I would also like to congratulate them. And I would also like to say them how fortunate they are in being able to study in a department brings them so close to the horizon of world of knowledge. Because the moment you cross the international border, either physically as a pilot or as an engineer or mentally through the excursion of the English achievement, just think it philosophically and you'll find the answer to it. So I find that your research has been extremely in-depth, and you have also talked about range, the number of inputs that we put in the language, and the amount of domain output in terms of domain they come out. Okay, the numbers in domain is less. That's why it is so precise, and that is also that English language, in a sense, I would say that English language, in a sense of aviation linguistic or aviation language, is an architecture where post-structuralism works better than, in fact, classical sense of different theories. I think I have made myself clear to you, and I would also like to thank you that you have got great potential. You can inspire your other colleagues also to do same kind of research work, and I'm sure many of you can join as English Authority of Bangladesh. In fact, we have language experts, but they are just a couple of them, two or three, and two or three are not enough for us because they have to take tests constantly. And in many cases, because if your number is more, then you cannot do justice to the examination. So we need people like you more. And it gives me a kind of a thrill that I have relearned many things by listening to you. And I would also like to thank the faculty of ULAB for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk. And I think if my talk has been useful to you, I feel myself as having been richly rewarded by your attention. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your inspiration and insight. I know that all of us here today have been greatly benefited because of you. If anyone has any questions or any sort of comments, everyone is welcome. You may ask them now.
I want to really thank Mahmoud Hussain, sir. I mean, thank you so much, sir, for joining here. And I mean, the appreciations from your side, it was huge for me. Like, wow, I was blown away. So thank you very much once again for giving these, like insightful information. And yeah, I'm really grateful. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll try to organize a presentation by you, this same presentation, probably to Civil Aviation Authority of Bangladesh. I think if Dr. Mahmoud Hassan Khan agrees, and I think they will be very proud to hear from a student of master's degree that she has done basically work for them. Okay, there probably you'll meet one or two.
Oh my God, am I allowed to scream? Oh my God.
Thank you, sir, for organizing it. And I'm also proud of Radia Al Rashid. Radia, you have done a wonderful job. In fact, I wanted Radia to do more like conversation analysis, but Radia was like, no, I want to do more aviation linguistics. I said, okay, because it's your project. So, and she did really very well. She pushed herself, and a lot of things what she did was done by herself. It's not that, I'm basically a conversationalist. So I was trying to push her in that dimension, but she was going in the dimension of aviation linguistics. And I think she has done a wonderful job. And that's what, and sir, when you were explaining the world of aviation, I think this is how university and how, people like you who are in the real world, we need to collaborate in such a way that our students can be benefited, universities can be benefited, and more research can be done in that way. Thank you very much, sir, for your kind presence.
Just one more word. Dr. Mahmoud Hassan, the way, in fact, Radia has done her research, she can expand it into a PhD thesis also. I mean, the thesis statement could be something like that. The linguistic skills are a measure for flight safety, or say, for example, linguistics skill are a measure for strategic objective of IQ. That is number one, as determined by the different states. Okay, in the process of their treating language as a medium of communication. something like this, and then she can find out the countries which are better in the communication skill, they have less number of accidents, and the countries which are poor in communication skill, they have done in fact worse. And then what she needs, data and the analysis of data with the help of statistical model. I think that would be a very good research work, and that can become a source of further research for the other people. I mean, she has done a very good work, and for a master degree paper, I think the enormous amount of hard work that she has put in can always be expanded into something in which she decides to become specialized or expert. And this could be a very special field, because I tell you, sir, the ICAO, International Civil Aviation Organization, it gives tremendous amount of importance on the language skill, and the language in political sense at ICAO means English. So this benefit she can always take for future, and I'm sure the Civil Aviation Authority of Bangladesh will also be looking forward for recruiting many more English experts, and her master degree thesis can be expanded into her PhD thesis. I mean, this is just a suggestion. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So any other comments or questions from anyone?
Thank you so much to both Professor Mahmood Hassan Khan and Mahmood Hussain sir for the kind of support and the kind of comments you've made about Radia's work. She is one of our brilliant students. She has proved herself over her 4 years of undergrad study, and I think this is sort of a demonstration of all the skills and all the qualities that she has acquired and improved upon and nurtured over the last 4 years. So congratulations to Radia. I'm feeling really proud of you just hearing all these wonderful words about your work from these two esteemed people. So,
Congratulations once again.
Thank you so much once again.
and Radia actually volunteered to do this talk because she was in, her classmates and her junior, friends asked her to do this because they were interested to hear more about it. And she volunteered to do this talk for us. And I think that it was a wonderful idea. I'm so glad that you came forward to do this. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am, me too.
Daria?
So congratulations, Radia Al Rashid. So we have now come to the end of our today's session. May I request Ms. Anifa Ghari Rahman to give the vote of thanks and bring the program to close. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. So just a formal sort of rounding up of the program. And of course, my gratitude and major thanks to Air Vice Marshal Mahmood Hussain sir, former High Commissioner to Brunei Darussalam, for accepting the invitation and joining us. It was actually very short notice, and I really appreciate your taking the time to also walk us through a lot of these aspects and give so many interesting research ideas that I think our upcoming young researchers will be able to take advantage of and explore in a lot more detail as they look for dissertation topics and move into their master's programs. And even in the master's program also will have these, can use these ideas. So thank you so much, sir, for being here and gracing the occasion. I would also like to thank Professor Shamshad Murtaza. Unfortunately, he could not, stay for too long, but I think he heard some part of your presentation, Radia, and I can guarantee that he's also feeling very proud of your work. I'm also grateful to him for making the connection with Mahmood Hussain sir, because he was actually the contact person, and so he put me in touch with sir. So I'm grateful to him, as always.
Please give him my regards.
I will.
Please give him my regards and tell him that, I mean, I'm very sad about the incident that has happened, and he has been going through probably.
I will do that, sir. I think he knows that he has all our good wishes with him. I'm also very thankful to Professor Mahmoud Hassan Khan for supervising Radia in the last semester and for being here today to support her and give us your support as usual, as always. And to our speaker, Radia Al Rashid, I already have thanked you, and I, formally want to give you thanks for coming in and doing this. And I'm sure that you will be getting lots of emails from all the, those in the dissertation, doing their dissertations, or the younger ones who will be looking for guidance and advice from you. To Mohammad Mushur Rahman, our teaching assistant, who was instrumental in putting this program together with the help of our admin officer, Leah Nipa Bishash. Thank you both very much for taking care of the logistics. Sanjida Alum, who designed the poster, and Shahriar Hossein Shetu, of course, for hosting this program again on very short notice. Thank you, Shahriar, for doing this. And I'm really grateful to all our faculty members and our students who joined this program. I was very surprised to see a huge number of students who had come in, and I'm very grateful to you for joining us. So thank you all very much, and I look forward to more such programs from our students, and hoping that, we'll see a lot more people interested in this field of aviation, which I hear from Mahmoud Hussain sir that very few people really know about this field and for job opportunities and careers. So do explore that option. So thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Take
so care, all of you.
Take care. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.